Hello, welcome to Bardscraft. In this video I'll try questionable techniques as I craft a cardboard temple for D&D, and I'll continue by making desert terrain for it later. This build will be a combination of cardboard, the material anyone can find, XPS foam, a material that nobody bothers to Google, and an experimental technique with PVA glue. Here I'm doing some tests to see if I can apply textures on cardboard walls. What's that? I left lots of PVA glue in this box and it dried to a clear, perhaps water-looking material. I'll try to make water here. My strange ideas are not essential for the main part of this build, the temple. So I'll start by building that, as I get results from my methods in trial. I cut out the piece for the floor of the temple first. In this build there shouldn't be any warping related problems, so cardboard works well. I measured the tiles next. Remember that the walls will reduce the floor size a bit. Cardstock from an oat package. I marked and cut out these 2.5 cm wide strips of cardstock. Then I cut these into squares that will function as floor tiles. The utility knife works well, but the kitchen knife is more satisfying. These are simply attached with PVA glue. I applied only a bit to make sure there is no glue overflow. I now keep a jar of half-dried PVA glue around. The glue is stickier and it's easy to work with. Alright, almost done. The squares don't fit perfectly here. This is where the tower will stand. I cut 2 tiles thinner and thought, that's good enough. Okay, I don't think we need to do more for the floor. Next up, walls for the first floor. I want to keep them low so they don't block too much vision on the game table. I cut out 4 cm high cardboard walls. Over these I'll build the upper floors. I cut them into the right length and then glued them on. Here I'm using PVA glue, but I recommend hot glue for this instead. For a while I haven't visited a store where they sell hot glue sticks at a reasonable price, so I had to make sure the walls stay in place until the glue is dry enough. These strips are 2 cm wide. I glued these around the base of the walls as a way to make the foundation of the building sturdier. I placed these a bit lower to increase the height of the floor. A doorway will be cut out here later. Next, I made the upper floor as shown. The piece fits well. This will not be a full floor. There will be walkways around the halls. I cut the floor so that the same tiles fit. This should work well. Here, below the tower, there shall be a full floor. There we go. I proceeded by gluing on the cardstock floor tiles. Hey, if you're enjoying the video so far, do subscribe and why not like the video, that certainly helps. Okay, I continued with the construction of walls. I plan to make a high, curved roof that goes over this wall. That should work well. I made 2 of these. I cut out a window on one piece. I also have to cut away material from the other one after it's glued on. I glued on the walls together with 1.5 cm cardstock strips. Makes this sturdier and works as a lock-on mechanism for the modular floors. Again, use hot glue. This was way too tricky to balance while it dried. In between, I glued straight walls that are slightly lower than those of the lower floor. For a while I thought about how to make the roof removable, preferably along with the tower I'll build soon. I think I have a plan. It requires lots of cardstock. A good way to acquire more cardstock for hobby use is to eat more oats or anything that comes in cardstock boxes. Here we have 2 pieces, large enough to cover one side of the roof each. I made sure that the corners were at a 90-degree angle. To make supports for the roof, I used this wall to get the right shape. Then I cut out these 2 pieces. In order to glue together the roof, I bent the pieces first. Then used plenty of PVA glue, hoping everything stays in place. Using small pieces of tape made this a bit easier. It stops the roof from sliding around the supports. I wanted to make this unnecessarily complicated by adding large windows in the roof. This piece here is the same shape as the window in the wall. I traced out that shape in the middle of the roof and then cut it out carefully. I did the same for the other side as well. These parts of the upper floor walls also had to be cut off, so I did just that. A roof over the window is made like this. Bend a cardstock sheet in half, then bend a slight curvature matching that of the window. Then you can just glue it in. Luckily, I found one hot glue stick while cleaning up my workspace. This would have been too difficult with PVA glue. With a larger sheet of cardstock, you could make all of this in one piece. Once the glue is set, cut off the excess. It's not that crucial to get clean cuts under the roof. There we go, I just cut off the excess down here and called it done. That's pretty good. Usually everything I build is slightly crooked, as I eyeball much of the measurements. This looks leveled enough. Now it is time for the tower. I hope I have enough hot glue for the most tricky parts. I started with the simple things, leaving stairs, windows and ladders for later, or so I thought. I cut 4 long pieces, 2 of which are slightly narrower. It was barely held together by the sparing application of hot glue, so I poured in PVA glue and let it flow into the joints. Then I cut out some space for the tower. That's a good tight fit. When cutting away from the roof, I first cut away slightly less, then tested the fit and made the necessary adjustments. Before gluing, I cut away a part of the tower. From here, 2 pillars will go all the way down to the first floor. I then attached the tower with a bit of hot glue, then added PVA glue. Being messy is no problem, as long as the mess stays under the roof. While that dried, I made the floor for the highest level. Not sure about the walls yet, I decided to make the roof first. I folded and bent 2 cardstock pieces as shown. Hoping to be really lucky, I traced out the shape on one of the roofs, only a bit narrower. I cut out these 2 pieces that fit on the other roof piece quite well. Then I glued them on. I'll have to do some adjustments once this is fully glued with PVA. After a while it looked like this. Next I cut here to make a window. Good, next I made the walls that will support the roof. After some test pieces I managed to create these fitting pieces. I glued these on as usual. Oops, I forgot to cut out the windows. Fixed that and also removed this glue I had put here for no reason at all. As with the other roofs, I also glued on overhanging cardstock strips. Okay, that fits well enough. Not perfect though. I covered with cardstock strips down here as well, and thought about making a window here, but decided that would be unnecessary. Next I took upon myself the glorious task of laying the roof. So far I have cut out hundreds of these pieces. To build the roof I attached these shingles with glue, 1 row at a time. Making a shingle roof like this requires no skill, only patience. Here, where different parts of the roof meet, I had to shape the shingles to fit. Otherwise, this is pretty straightforward. The outer side of the roof can be cut clean later. I managed to lay the shingles into quite even lines by positioning the tip of each shingle in the same place. Now I'm over halfway done. According to my rough calculations, I need about 800 shingles in total. Luckily, these are quite easy to cut out. At some points, naturally, I thought, why did I make such large roofs? Okay, almost done now. These areas were a bit harder to cover. Luckily, you can get away with not laying all shingles straight. In this way, I didn't have to shape the pieces to fit this curve. By the way, the PVA glue water I mentioned in the start doesn't have me convinced, but perhaps it could be used for a bubbling, toxic pool. Yes, it is done. Next I trimmed the shingles at the sides. These edges need to be covered. I decided to use cardstock strips. I now got myself a larger glue gun that fits these 10mm glue sticks. They are significantly cheaper. So I recommend getting a large glue gun unless you need a smaller one for precision work. I just went ahead and glued these strips right on the shingles, like this. Then I cut off the excess cardstock. Working with these materials is so much easier and enjoyable now that I got the hot glue gun. For the top of the roof, I cut out wider strips that I folded over the roof as shown. When working with hot glue, remember to remove excess glue, and especially these annoying thin threads of glue. Okay, up here on the tower roof I cut the inner ends of the bits so that all of the 4 bits fit together. That's not a good fit, so I glued on these pieces. When working with cardstock, you can always fix your mistakes by hiding them under extra layers. The underside of the roof is not pretty, so I fixed that. Using the roof as a guide, I got the right curvature for these pieces. I applied glue on the edges first. Then, once the piece was in place, I poured in more under. At first I thought these would be extra tricky to get right, but it turns out they can be bent slightly if they don't fit perfectly. Alright, next I cut out a hole for the door down here. Since this project became greater than expected, I'll make any potential doors, stairs and windows separately in another episode. For now, the cutout piece will be my door. Now the next big step is to cover all of these cardboard edges. You can use various fillers to make these prettier. I chose to glue on cardstock strips. After a while of cutting and gluing on these thin strips, I was done. Here is the placeholder door. Perhaps it's good enough just as it is. So basically I spent a few hours covering the cardboard corrugations. Here I also visually covered a gap that I noticed earlier. Didn't want to farm more watch time, so I chose to not record everything. The last thing I did before texturing and painting was to glue on curved pieces as ornaments on the walls. Doing this is optional if you just want to build a quick cardboard building. By gluing on these pieces, the large flat surfaces become more interesting, and there are more edges to be dry brushed when painting. Alright, now it's time for something less tedious. Here is the texture I mentioned in the beginning of this video. It looks promising, and here I also checked how some of the cardstock strips will be painted. So how is the texture made? Easy. First, cover all desired surfaces with a thin layer of PVA glue. I covered all cardboard surfaces and some of the cardstock strips. And next, apply baking soda. I did this quite messily, to get everything covered quickly before the glue dries. Afterwards I spread it out with my fingers and removed the excess soda, which can be used again. As a bonus, the entire building will become durable from the glue. On the most magnificent walls, I did not cover the detail cardstock strips. They will be painted metallic instead of stone. Or that was the plan, I forgot this while painting. Hey, it's time to paint. I mixed this light brown from craft paints and started by covering the textured areas. A slightly watered down paint works best, as it gets into the textures more easily. And also it doesn't reduce the depth of textures as a thicker paint would. I wasn't too careful when painting near surfaces that will be of a different color. Might regret that later, because some of the baking soda will come off and stick onto other surfaces, creating unwanted messy textures. One thing I was thinking about was the baking soda. It's a salt, so does it have any effect on the long-term durability of this craft? Here I had also textured the visible areas under the roofs. The rest is just painted with brown, later I painted it with a black. Once I was done painting with the brown, I dry brushed the same surfaces with a tan. I know the buildings would look great when painted black, grey and tan, but for this temple I chose to go for a look that fits a desert theme. Take your time when dry brushing. I sometimes make the mistake of applying too much paint on the brush. My impatience then leads to a messier finish. I was wondering how to paint in the most optimal order. It's probably best to paint the roofs first, as there is some violent brushwork involved in getting paint in between and under the shingles. I want this building to look good, even when looking up from the level of the table. A dark blue was my choice of base coat. I pressed the paint into crevices with plenty of it on the brush. Any excess paint is easily removed later. But fear not the messy excess paint, for it works as texture. Here you can see the textures when I overbrushed the roof with blue. By the way, these cardboard internals are quite handy to hold on to when painting. Alright, the most satisfying step is to dry brush with a lighter blue. In honor of these epic shingles, some brushing noises. To complete the shingles, I dry brushed with a tan. Amazing, there we have the final sloppy base coat textures. For reference, this side is not yet dry brushed. That's even better than I imagined it would be. Next, the details shall be painted. I base coated all the soon to be gold strips with dark brown. The textured areas will still be dry brushed, so my idea is that I can cover any mess I make with the brown. In the beginning I was unsure about my choice of colors, but now it seems that everything might come together, especially with the gold dry brush over the dark brown areas. The challenge here is to not brush over the blue shingles. If you want to do better, add more layers of cardstock. That looks good when dry brushed. After a while I came to the conclusion that everything except the roof looks bad. I dry brushed the textured areas with white to see if that helps. For some reason, I can't seem to get the colors right. The textures look good, but my choices of colors don't. I went ahead and applied black wash on the textured areas and gold surfaces as my last attempt to save this. I applied more on the corners and also some on the roof. Okay, there it is. I now realized I have been working in too much of a hurry. On closer inspection, everything seems messy. I hope you can do better, or I in the future. As mentioned, I applied some of the baking soda textures on unwanted areas. I don't see any problems with the methods used. In fact, they worked quite well. I just failed in the execution. Let's just say that the point here was to try new methods, just to see what happens, and to learn. Anyway, I'll continue in the next video where I make a desert diorama for the temple. If you like this video, go ahead and watch more, better videos I have made, and do subscribe if you want to see the next one.